So in 2005, a group of 7 friends, all of them experienced hikers, set out to climb Mount Arjuna in Indonesia. For them, this was supposed to be a walk in the park, just another weekend climb. But the mountain, it had something else in mind. This is the true story of how that trip went so wrong. A story about arrogance, about forces you can't explain, and about a price that had to be paid.
And yeah, you heard that right. 7 went up, but only 6 came back down. Now, this isn't just some ghost story you tell around a campfire. This is based on the account of one of the actual survivors. So we're going to break down exactly how this simple hike turned into an absolute fight for their lives and for their souls.
You know, the trouble really started before they even took a single step on that mountain. See, this group had climbed much tougher peaks before. In their minds, Arjuna was going to be easy, a low-effort kind of thing. And that collective feeling, that overconfidence, that hubris, that was their first big mistake. It was like they sent an open invitation to whatever ancient power was watching over that place.
And they were walking right towards a place with a pretty serious reputation, Alas Lali Jiwo. The name literally translates to the Forest of Forgotten Souls. And this isn't just a name on a map, you guys. The local legends say it's either a cursed piece of land or maybe even a living thing, an entity that preys on people who come with bad intentions or impure thoughts. And it just, it swallows their souls. In this group, they were heading straight for its territory.
This right here is the absolute key. The survivor admitted that right after they prayed for a safe journey, this little thought popped into his head. This is going to be so easy. The chilling part, when he later told his friends, he found out that every single one of them had the exact same thought at the exact same time. It was like a wave of arrogance washed over them. And in the eyes of the mountain, that meant their intentions were no longer pure.
So, how did the mountain respond to this disrespect? Well, it didn't wait around. Almost right away, the group started getting hit with these bizarre, escalating warnings. And we're not talking subtle little hints here. These were like giant, blaring alarm bells going off, and they just chose to ignore every single one. And these warnings just got more and more intense. First, time itself started to get weird. A hike that should have taken 30 minutes took a full hour. A little while later, one of the friends, Udin, takes a 5-minute nap and wakes up completely convinced that 2 whole days had passed, that they'd already gone home and come back. Then they get a direct warning, a mysterious old hermit on a cliff desperately waving his arms trying to get them to stop. They actually listen for a moment, they pause for about 15 minutes, and a massive tree comes crashing down on the path right where they would have been. A clear, life-saving sign, right? But nope, they kept going.
Once the sun went down, the warnings turned into straight-up attacks. One of the friends, Sumar, reaches for a beautiful orchid, but to everyone else, that flower suddenly transforms into this monstrous snake with the head of a monkey, and it bites him. But here's the really creepy part. The narrator, the guy telling the story, he only ever saw a flower. Later that night, another friend, Diaz, steps out of the tent and is immediately choked by something they can't see. The mountain wasn't just warning them anymore, it was actively trying to hurt them.
The next day rolls around, and you'd think it couldn't possibly get any worse. Oh, but it does. The physical world starts to completely fall apart. They think they're on a simple, clear trail heading forward, but they've actually wandered into a supernatural trap, and there is no obvious way out.
What happens next is just physically impossible. They're on a single path, there's no forks, no turns. You can't get lost, right? Wrong. To figure out where they're going, they start tying colored bells to trees. But after walking for hours and hours, they suddenly come across the very first bell they tied. They were literally walking in a perfect circle on a perfectly straight path. It just makes no sense. So just as they're running out of water and completely starting to panic, the forest just opens up. Poof! They stumble out into this huge, quiet, peaceful-looking valley. It feels like a total miracle. They've escaped the crazy looping forest, they've found water, they think they're safe. But that relief, it was about to disappear real fast.
At sunset, they all gather to pray, to thank God for getting them out of that mess. They finish their prayer together, and their final, unified amen gets an answer. But it's not an echo. The sound that comes roaring back at them from all across the empty valley sounds like a massive crowd in a sold-out stadium. They were not alone, not even close.
In a flash, that peaceful valley transforms into something the locals call Pasar Setan, the Devil's Market. Suddenly, there are ghostly stalls everywhere, run by these horrifying creatures. But the most terrifying part of all? Every single person could see it.
Except for the narrator. He saw nothing. He had to lead his terrified friends through a phantom crowd he couldn't even perceive, just following their panicked whispers to dodge monsters that were, for him, completely invisible.
So they managed to survive the market. They even made it to the summit of the mountain. You'd think the worst has to be over now, but you'd be wrong. They had lost something up there, or more accurately, someone, and the spirits of that forest were coming to collect what they were owed.
Okay, this part is a real mind-bender. On their way back down, they run into their friend, Koos, and he is furious. He's yelling at them for abandoning him the day before, leaving him to spend the night all alone. And they're all just confused because Koos was with them the whole time, right? That's when it hits them. The Koos who climbed to the summit with them, the one who was super quiet and withdrawn, that wasn't him. It was an imposter, a doppelganger. And when they finally got their photos developed, the spot where the fake Koos was standing was just empty space. So they get back to a shelter and the nightmare just starts all over again. The same creatures from the Devil's Market are back and they've completely surrounded the camp. But this time, they're not just putting on a show. They are staring, they are growling, and all of their hostile energy is laser-focused on just one member of the group, a guy named Biclius.
Trapped and absolutely terrified, the narrator finally confronts Beatius, demanding to know what he did, and Beatius just breaks down. He confesses that earlier, when he went to get water, he did something profane. He desecrated the forest. So the spirit's anger wasn't just about the group's general arrogance anymore. No, this was personal. It was all about what Beatius did.
At that exact moment, this insane storm just explodes out of nowhere. And in the middle of it, Bigoius lets out this gasp. His whole body goes completely rigid. His eyes roll back into his head, and he collapses. Dead. Just like that. No fight, no explanation. 1 second he was alive, the next he was gone. The debt had been collected.
Now, the horror really should have ended right there, with Voicius's death. But it didn't. In that freezing, storm-battered shelter, the survivors were about to face the story's final and maybe most chilling twists. Truths that they would only be able to piece together long after they were rescued.
So 4 friends are now left, trapped with Bilius's body. To survive the insane cold and keep from freezing to death, they came up with this simple game. Each person stood in one of the 4 corners of the little hut. The person in corner A would walk to corner B and tap them. Then B would walk to C and tap them, C to D and so on, in a constant loop to keep moving, generate heat, and stay awake.
But wait a second. Think about that. 4 people, 4 corners. When person D leaves their corner to go and tap person A, what happens to corner D? It's empty. And corner A is already occupied by person A. For the game to work, D needs to tap someone in corner A. So, how is that possible? Who was there to be tapped?
And here's the unbelievable thing. The game never stopped. For hours and hours, that loop continued without a single break. Every time someone arrived at a corner, there was a shoulder there waiting to be tapped. The only conclusion they could ever come to was that the spirit of their dead friend Bippus stayed behind with them, taking his place in that 4th corner so they could survive the night.
There's just one last tragic piece to this whole puzzle. Days after they were finally rescued, they heard the news that another body had been found up on Mount Arjuna. It was the hermit, the same old man who had waved at them so frantically, warning them away from that falling tree.
A local village elder gave them the devastating final answer. The mountain had demanded a price for their arrogance, a price that should have been paid when that tree fell. But the hermit interfered. He broke the spiritual law of the forest to save them, and in doing so, he had to pay their debt for them with his own life. This whole story is just a terrifying cautionary tale, isn't it? It makes you wonder what kind of unseen powers are out there in the world's wild places, and what happens when we forget to show respect. Because on Mount Arjuna, it seems like some debts can only be paid with a soul.